Welcome. My name is Solomoon, and I have a story for you. My two friends from Vietnam, who we will refer to as Hannah and Eric, were attending university from overseas, and neither of them, understandably, had their driver's license yet. They had been dating for about 6 months, but because they both lived on campus, they couldn't go anywhere or do anything especially romantic. Even if they were to pay for a ride to a nice restaurant, seeing the distance they would have to travel, the ride to and from the restaurant would be twice as expensive, if not 3 times as expensive, as the meal itself. And because they were from overseas, they didn't have jobs, and therefore had to budget their money throughout the entire semester, and that type of expense was out of the question. So they came to me for help. There are multiple reasons they came to me. The first was that I was already friends with both of them, and the second was that I was known to help foreign students attend events, get groceries, and at times help them attend religious services, seeing how far away the nearest Buddhist temple or Catholic church was away from campus. I began to think of ways to help them. At first, I thought maybe I could simply chauffeur them, and then wait outside the restaurant for them to finish and maybe listen to a book while I waited. But I felt like having a friend drive them to and from their date would be a little embarrassing, and it would make them feel like children. It, at the very least, would kill the mood. Sitting with your significant other and your friend after a date on a 45-minute drive is not exactly what I would call romantic. That simply wasn't going to work. I wanted to give them a really special experience. I agreed to help them on their date, but I began planning to surprise them. On the day of their date, I met with Eric a few hours beforehand in his dorm. His room was fairly large and sparsely decorated, with a wooden floor. During the semester, his roommate had transferred to another school, leaving the massive room all to himself. While I was there, I convinced him it would be romantic to watch the movie at Hannah's before going on the date, and give her some time to prepare. While he was getting dressed, he was so nervous I had to help him with his tie. Even though he had been dating Hannah for over 6 months, this was still his first official big date with her, and he was petrified. Before he left, I let him know he had to meet me in front of his dorm at 6 on the dot, or he might miss his reservation. As he was leaving, I told him that he would be taken to the nicest restaurant I knew. What he didn't know is that I had not only taken his key, but his ID card as well, and with the help of the RAs, I began preparing. The first difficulty was getting everything out of my car. I did not have enough supplies on hand, so it would take multiple trips. Not only that, but I needed to prepare the room, and as much as I had prepared beforehand, there were some things that were time sensitive. So I set the RAs to begin hanging the sheets as I gathered the supplies and arranged the cloth roses, set up the white table, and the podium. Before I left, I let him know that he had to meet me in front of his dorm at 6 on the dot, or he might miss his reservation. As he was leaving, I told him that they would be taken to the nicest restaurant I knew. What he didn't know is that I had not only taken his key, but his ID as well. And with the help of the RAs, I began preparing. The first difficulty was getting everything out of my car, but I didn't have enough supplies on hand, so I'd have to make multiple trips. Not only that, but I needed to prepare the room, and as much as I'd prepared for this ahead of time, there were some things that were time sensitive. So I set the RAs to begin hanging the sheets as I gathered all the supplies, arranged the cloth roses, set up the white silk and the podium. About 25 minutes before 6, while I was getting on my tuxedo, Eric sent me a text, asking if I had seen his ID or his keys. I told him that I had not, but that he should text the RA and see if it was in the lost and found. The RA on duty got a call almost immediately afterwards, and the RA, smirking, told Eric that he had found his ID and his keys. When the call ended, they turned to me and told me that Eric was going to be coming back now, and that the two would be arriving early. And we weren't entirely ready yet, but I guess it didn't matter. I sent the RA with Eric's ID to meet them halfway to cause a distraction and hopefully slow them down. The RA would run ahead and tell Eric they had left the key in the dorm, because I could make do without the ID, but I still needed that key. So we rushed to finish last-minute preparations and get into position. And by position, I meant everyone but myself clearing the lobby. But I only had to wait a few seconds before I saw them approaching. Luckily, the RA was distracting them as they approached the door, so they didn't see me standing there. And as they entered, they found the floor littered with rose petals, and a large banner hanging from the ceiling that read in gold letters, Casa dell'Americano. And I was there in a full suit looking down at a binder on top of a podium. They looked surprised as I slowly traced a gloved finger down the page, my eyes following it to add further emphasis. And then I waited a half second and greeted them. "Ah, Miss Hannah. Mr. Eric, I see you've arrived early for your reservation. Luckily, we can seat you in advance, if you'll just follow me." Hannah had a bemused smile on her face, and Eric simply looked dumbfounded. They clearly didn't know exactly how to respond, but both followed wordlessly after me. We followed the trail of rose petals, which led all the way back to Eric's room, which was luckily pretty close by. I told them about their 3-course meal that I would be giving them. I gave Eric a slight smirk as I used his key to unlock the door. Soft jazz greeted us as we entered the room, which had been completely transformed. From the ceiling, white sheets had been draped into a cube shape, making a smaller room with silhouettes of hearts imprinted on the sheets. I held back the curtains to reveal in the center of the room was a table with a white tablecloth and an electric candle. Wine glasses and fancy silverware rested in front of an origami swan napkin. Sitting where a plate would normally rest was a folded cardstock with the evening meal printed in large, loopy cursive font. I sat them down and asked what they would like to drink, but I already knew them so well I had preemptively purchased the type of drinks they would prefer. Then I left and went to the dorm kitchen to pick up their appetizers, which still needed a few minutes because they had arrived early. I also needed to start the steak, so I called my friend because I didn't have time to cook everything all at once and take care of Eric and Hannah. And she was a better cook than me anyway, and so with how expensive a filet mignon cut is, I thought I'd be more comfortable with her cooking it. I had to manage to leave campus and pick up the steak while it was resting, finish the cake, prepare the appetizer, and return to fill their drinks. But first, I had to finish cooking the little bit of chicken to put on top of their Caesar salad, and returned to fill their drinks back up. They looked so cute drinking soda from their little wine glasses, the electric candle illuminating the meal. Something else I found pretty amusing was Hannah had set aside her napkin because she didn't want to destroy the origami. So to make her feel better, I got a napkin for her that wasn't folded. Now, I knew they were pretty slow eaters, so I had a bit of time before the steak had to be ready. The advantage of having my friend cook the steak was not only that it would probably taste better from her, but that I could go do other things in between that time. The bad news was that she didn't live on campus, so I had to drive out halfway to meet her and pick up the steak and rush back. And then I had to call the RA to let me inside the building when I came back because I didn't have Eric's ID anymore. I rushed back and I prepared their plates with the steak on it, and I walked back in. I swapped the plates out with their appetizer plates, which were now completely empty, and refilled their drinks and headed back out. I didn't spend a lot of time in the room because I wanted to give them some alone time. That, and I had to finish icing the cake. See, I'd baked a cake for them, and it was just a small chocolate cake, but I was in such a hurry to get everything else ready, I hadn't finished icing it yet. So the moment I was out of the room, I ripped off my tuxedo blazer and white gloves, put on a white apron, and began to ice. While I was heading to the kitchen, I could see the RAs already beginning to pick up the artificial rose petals and taking down the banner, making the cleanup much easier. But in no time, I had already finished icing the cake and slicing it, putting it on the plate, and drizzling a little bit of chocolate syrup for decoration. Throwing my apron aside, sliding the blazer back on, donning my gloves, and rushing back through the door as I presented their final course. I took their old plates and used silverware, and went back to the kitchen to begin cleaning up. I'd already been cleaning up as I was going along, so I didn't have that much to do, and I would likely load the final dishes and clean them at home. When I went to Eric's room for the last time, I quickly cleaned up the rest of the mess, and I left Eric's keys on the table and the origami swan napkin for Hannah. I looked at them both and said, "Thank you for coming to Casa dell'Americano. We hope you had a magical evening, We hope to see you again. I winked at Hannah and turned to leave. Eric stopped me for a second and gave me a firm handshake, palming me some money. It wasn't nearly enough to pay for the evening, but seeing how much he enjoyed himself, really that was all I was after, and I appreciated the gesture. I exited the room and started walking back to my car. While I was on my way back to my car, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around to see it was Eric, who basically tackled me with a hug before I could react. You know, seeing how happy they were is something I still think of. What he did wasn't anything special, but making a difference in their lives, even a small one, felt special. Giving them a moment to feel like they really mattered, and letting them know how much we cared. I know it's been really hard for everyone recently. It's been so incredibly difficult for me as well. And I just wanted to let you all know that no matter how dark it is, someone cares. Someone always cares. And those small moments of kindness mean the world. Thank you so much for listening to this telling of Casa della Americano. This has been Solomoon, and I hope I have the opportunity to tell you another story. But for now, I hope you have a wonderful day or evening. Thanks for stopping by.